Desde Aroterra entendemos que es un dilema del siglo XXI. Estamos capturando un número inconmensurable de imágenes de la Tierra, pero por otro lado darle sentido a tantos datos se volvió abrumador. Al utilizar un dron para el departamento de bomberos o procesando imágenes satelitales de todo el país para una agencia federal, quizás te preguntes, ¿cómo recolectamos, administramos, preparamos, accedemos y analizamos todos estos datos de forma eficiente? La respuesta a esto es ArcGIS, la tecnología más avanzada para convertir rápidamente grandes cantidades de imágenes y datos obtenidos por teledetección en información.
Hi everyone, right now we have the pleasure to talk with Giulia Bassani. So Giulia is an engineer student at the University of Turin, but she's also conducting a research project, two international research projects at Blue Marble Space Institute of Science, where she's currently studying the cosmic radiation shielding on Mars and sustainability in space. Welcome, Giulia. Oh my goodness, what is that? So today we're going to be talking about like learning through entertainment, and I think Giulia is an expert on this field. I'm not sure if Giulia is having a little bit of trouble with her mic, or this is part of the. Hello, yes, I thought it was all part of the entertainment.
Sorry.
I was like, she's an expert in entertainment. She's doing this.
My microphone is weird sometimes. I'm sorry for that.
Oh,
But
no,
yeah, I will be talking about science fiction, I guess. So, can I share my presentation and just get started?
yes, you can. I think you can click on the option that says share screen.
Cool, thank you. So,
and I want to give a heads up to everyone who's watching. Giulia also has like a YouTube channel that I particularly enjoy watching. So
really?
I do.
Okay, so let me see if you can see my screen.
That's perfect. I can still see with all the tools, and there we go. That's perfect.
Okay, so hi, I'm very happy to be here. I'm very happy to have the opportunity to talk about science fiction and how to learn and teach through science fiction. But I would like to maybe start by giving a brief introduction of who I am and what I'm doing in my normal day-to-day life. So as Sandra said, I'm currently a student of aerospace engineering at the Polytechnic University of Turin. I'm about to get my bachelor degree, and then I plan on continuing to study in the aerospace systems sector, and so become an engineer of aerospace systems and maybe space systems. I say that that's my goal. Other than that, I've been studying human missions to Mars for several years now. And actually, everything started when I was, I would say, 16 years old. Right now, I'm 21, because I found myself taking part in a space contest where I developed a base on Mars. And it was my first project, my first time studying this planet. And I absolutely fell in love with that kind of study. And I think it also helped that I went forward in the competition and I arrived to the European finals, which was pretty cool. But it was such a crazy experience, and I learned so much about Mars that was the moment when I decided that I wanted to become a Mars expert, probably, which I don't know exactly what it means, but just my dream is to know all there is to know about human missions to Mars. So I continued to study, and also I wrote a book, which I will tell you more about later, which is based on Mars, and that also helped me to study more the planet. But only recently I've become a Mars researcher, I would say, which is very general and doesn't really make sense to say Mars researcher, but I like it. I like to say it that way. At the Blue Marble Space Institute for Science, and in fact, I'm in particular working on two research programs. Actually, one is finished, and I'm working only on one. However, these two were one on cosmic radiations, because as probably you know, cosmic radiation is one of the worst problems that we have to face when we explore deep space, where as deep space I mean further than the magnetosphere of the Earth that keeps us protected from cosmic radiations, because they are absolutely dangerous. They cause cancer and many other health issues. So it's important that we find solutions, because wherever we go, we're always going to find that problem, and we have to solve it somehow. The second research is in fact on sustainability and why it is important to be sustainable in space. What does it mean to be sustainable? It basically means making sure that we will be able to continue human missions into space on a long term. So basically, let's not go to space and use all our resources in doing so that the future generations, the next generations, will still have the capabilities of exploring space. More or less, that's what it means. Because it's often taken for granted, but we should put some more focus into making space exploration sustainable. This is very important, and this is why we're researching it. And in particular, I'm focusing on this subject right now for my research, and probably I will be, for the first time, the leading author of a paper that will come out in probably 1 year. And I'm pretty excited about that. It's going to be super, super cool. So I guess right now it's the time to start talking about my novels. Yes, in fact. So At Martin 12 is probably my most known novel because it's set on Mars, and everybody knows how much obsessed I am with Mars. So At Martin 12 is pretty famous for that reason, I would say. However, it is a hard science fiction. And let's start there. So what does it mean, hard science fiction? It means that we are trying to make science, it is based on realistic. So not too much, I would say, invented, a bit like it is in Star Wars, for example, but more like it is in The Martian. I'm sure you've all heard about that book or that movie of Mark Watney stranded on Mars. That whole novel is set on real and accurate scientific information. Not 100% accurate, but really, really close. And this is what I try to do with my book At Martin 12 as well. I was trying to be the more accurate that I could with my knowledge. And so what I did was trying to set a story inside the base that I had projected for the space contest that I told you about earlier. So we are on Mars. The protagonists are the first human beings ever born on Mars. In fact, they are born and raised, brought up inside this base. And it's interesting, I would say, because they are teenagers, just like any other teenager on Earth, you know. The problem is that they are living with a crew of astronauts, which are their family, and they've never been in contact with the Earth. So they have a completely different point of view on space exploration and on humanity and on, I would say, life in general. And they start wondering questions like, why are we here on Mars? Why is everyone else on Earth? What are we doing here? What is our purpose? And so they start they embark on an adventure to go and find the answers to those questions. The problem is that Mars is a dangerous place, and teenagers are famous for breaking the rules, as we all know. The problem is that if we break rules on Mars, that could be deadly, probably, or anyway, very, very dangerous. So that's where everything becomes interesting. However, to get to the point of the issue, I would say, one of the reasons why I decided to write this book, beyond my passion for writing, my passion for Mars, etc., what I wanted to do was trying to teach something about spaceflight and missions to Mars through entertainment and entertaining with an interesting story. Because in that period, there were some sagas for young adults that were pretty famous. I don't know, you've probably heard about Hunger Games or Divergent or Maze Runner. I was a big fan of those. And I remember how I would say enthralled I was by those stories, and I saw how many other people were as well interested and captured by those worlds and those characters and those stories. And so I wondered, what if those stories were based in a scientific background? Then probably those people that are fan of the story would be also fan of the science behind it. And so this is basically what I tried to do with At Markham 12. I wanted to create a story that could be relatable for young adults. So the protagonists are teenagers for that reason. But it is set on Mars, and it is set on a scientific groundwork so that everything that happens makes sense and is scientifically logical. So as the readers enters the stories and is like engulfed with everything that happens and all the emotions and everything, they also learn something. And so that was my goal. Then I wrote Kalopsia, which is my second novel. The first one I wrote was when I was 18 years old, while I wrote Kalopsia when I was 21, actually. It came out in January this year. And even though this isn't exactly science fiction, I'm going to say a couple of words on it as well, because the mindset that I applied is kind of the same, but for a different reason. So as I said, I'm a student of aerospace engineering, and that means that consequently I'm obviously also very passionate about aviation, airplanes, and in particular military airplanes. Not because I'm a fan of war or those weird stuff, but because I just love the whole engineering that lies behind those incredible machines that military airplanes are, basically. And so what I wanted to try and do with this novel was try to bring readers and I would say the young audience, the young generation, to love aviation as much as I did. And so again, I created a story where we have a teenage girl in a dystopian world with a strange military governmental sort of military academia, where she's recruited and she has to start a training. And at first everything seems like hell, but then she discovers that flying isn't actually that bad, but it's actually pretty cool indeed. And so she becomes to grow this passion, this love for flying. And I sort of built a whole philosophy behind reaching the sky and flying and freedom, but at the same time not being free at all, because she's in fact part of this military organization, and she will have to go to war at one point. So she's free to fly, but she's not free at the same time. So there is this kind of dichotomy that I try that I use to make the story more enthralling, more emotional, more interesting. At the same time, however, while the reader is engulfed in this whole emotional thing, they are brought into the world of aviation. And I remember some readers of Kalopsia who texted me and said, "Hey, now I am a fan of aviation, and what do I do about it?" And I was so happy because I had achieved my goal. However, this is basically the same concept. So I think stories and writing is so incredible, because you can literally catch people and bring them into your world. So I think that if we want to approach young people and bring them to science, then fiction is an amazing way to do it. So how do we approach the young public through fiction? This is something that I've been wondering a lot, and I've been trying to achieve for a long time with writing. And one of the first things that came to my mind when thinking about it was Harry Potter, obviously, because it has had such a large influence on people, obviously. So I wondered if Harry Potter was based on science instead of magic, which doesn't exist basically, and if science was, I would say, described or tackled with the same accuracy that the Harry Potter story is with magic, at the same way, but with science. How many people, how many young readers would have been influenced towards learning more on these matters? So thinking about this, I immediately got to think about Star Wars, because Star Wars is a large science fiction franchise that obviously has had a great influence on many young people as well. As we know, there are many young fans and also older fans. In fact, Star Wars is very old, I would say. I mean, I asked my mother about this. I went to my mom and I asked her, so did you like Star Wars when you were young? And she told me, yes, I did like Star Wars, in fact, because because it was cool. And I said, why did you like Star Wars though? And she said, for the actors. Okay, cool. Yeah, obviously actors do play a major role in fiction movies. But she also told me that at the time, Star Wars was so successful and people were so passionate about it, mostly because they loved science fiction and because Star Wars was one of the first movies with real effects that were pretty cool and people were excited about it. And so I asked my mom, do you think that if Star Wars was based on real science, then people would have been excited about that science just the way they are about the science fiction? And she said, yes. She said, probably it should have been as realistic as The Martian is, because my mom knows also The Martian. She's pretty fun about space, just like I am. That's my fault, by the way. However, yeah, of course, The Martian. We returned there because The Martian is, I would say, currently one of the greatest novels that is based on realistic science, and I would say The Martian is science fiction just because we haven't been to Mars yet. If we don't consider the crazy dust storms that there are that are described that are not actually that strong on Mars, but whatever, you know what I mean. The problem with The Martian is that the target audience is way more adult than young, and our goal is to reach younger people. So by putting this whole together, I understood that the goal that the writers, I don't know if there are some writers among you, but let's say it this way, the goal that we should try to achieve is writing great fiction that will be enthralling regardless of the circumstances, and have it based on real science. So let's create a story like the Harry Potter. What makes Harry Potter so special? Is it the magic? Not really. I thought about it, and it's actually not because of magic, but it's because the characters are so relatable. They're so relatable to the young audience. Think about it. They're just kids going to school, growing, and learning about life, and there are so many important themes and recurrent themes of real life that happen in the Harry Potter, even though they are concealed in this whole magic world, I would say. But what we have to achieve is make relatable stories, because enthralling and relatable are more or less the same thing. Because if you read something and you feel like, and you can understand, you can feel the character in some way, because you feel like you're more or less in the same situation, then you're a lot more emotionally invested. And emotion is so important when it comes to learning and to be influenced to become interested about something, I would say. So let's create stories that can be relatable to young people, and let's have them based on real science, as much as we can at least, so that people will find themselves entering the stories innocently and suddenly finding themselves super passionate about science. And that's basically the goal that we want to achieve. In particular, these days, some important themes that we should try to focus on in science fiction, trying at least, would be climate, environment and pollution, gender equality, violence and harassment, poverty and lack of education, terrorism, and I could add also quarantine. I don't know if you've been in quarantine due to COVID-19, probably so, because it's been a whole global thing, I would say. But quarantine, for example, is an amazing topic to face, for example, in space, because astronauts are continuously in quarantine. So imagine a story set in space where people have to be quarantined for some reason. That would be really relatable and people will still learn about something. So I think what we should try to do is talk about themes that are close to people. Talk about stories, bring stories that are close to people in some way, relatable, and have them based on science. Because this way, we will approach more and more people. I think this is how we need to try and use fiction to make people passionate about science. Because, I mean, these days, science is so important and it's becoming more and more important. And space, obviously. I'm going to talk about space because I'm so passionate about space. And we are now entering the space era where we're probably going to Mars and so many crazy things are going to happen, and it's important that people know about it. And so also to educate, it is important. And so this is what we need to try, and I think fiction is a great way to do it. Thank you. I think I'm done. So I would say if you have questions, I will be happy to answer. I don't even know how long I've been talking.
Thank you so much, Giulia. We really enjoyed just listening about you and how you use your passion to space and like you're promoting it through books. And we have like so many questions, so I'll go ahead and start asking because we have people from Argentina, Venezuela, República Dominicana asking questions.
So cool. Okay.
So the first one comes from Raul that says, Giulia, do you support the idea of an eventual terraforming of Mars or other bodies in the solar system?
Okay, I'm going to answer these questions with a very personal opinion on the matter. I think terraforming Mars, let's say Mars, is pretty useless, and I wouldn't do it, honestly, because we often forget that Mars is like an entire planet, and it's not something you do like that. It takes efforts, it takes money. I would say it's such a big it would be such a big thing and so expensive that I would say, why do we have to focus so much on poor Mars? Let's leave it like that and let's put those efforts into space exploration. Let's go farther into the solar system and let's put our efforts into that, because I don't think it's so necessary to terraform another planet. Not for now, at least. I don't know about a far future, but definitely not now, not in recent times. This is my opinion, though.
Thank you. The next question comes from Jose Alberto, and he's asking, like, if you think that in the future, colonies of Mars can create the conditions in Mars to create an atmosphere that could support the human life?
Okay, so this is more or less along the lines of the previous question. I mean, it might be, but I still think that's closer to science fiction than science right now, because it would still be something that would take such a long time to happen in so many efforts, and we would need to have the whole planet being colonized and not like a small area, if that makes sense. But even getting to colonizing a small area will take a lot of time and a lot of effort. It's not that easy. Space is not simple.
So now we have a question that's more related to your books, and Carlos is asking, um, what kind of readers are your books oriented to? So what's your audience, or what's the audience you're trying to get to? Because sometimes it's very difficult to get to understand technical languages that the average public doesn't understand, especially children.
Hmm. So I wouldn't say children, but I would say, okay, let's say from 12 years old to infinite. I mean, my grandmother read it as well and she enjoyed it. So, yeah, I mean, okay, I understand that technical language might be a problem, but that should be in the best interest of the writer to make it as more understandable as possible. And like not use technical languages like that, but try to be delicate and kind of explain what you're doing. If that makes sense.
It does make sense. So we also want to know, like, what led you to aerospace? Like, how did you that interest was born into you?
So everything started when I was 12 years old and I was in a library and I found myself reading a book by Stephen Hawking without really knowing who Hawking was at the time. um, and I became very passionate about astronomy and space in general, but I was 12 years old and I had like no clue if space could be a profession, a career at all or not. And let's say that my passion for engineering and aerospace then grew more in high school when our physics professor started talking about the International Space Station every single day because there was an Italian astronaut on board. And so he was obsessed, and as a consequence, I became obsessed as well, more or less. But that was the time when I understood what engineering is like and what's the whole preparation that lies behind launching into space and landing on celestial bodies, and that was absolutely crazy. So I decided that I wanted to do that.
Thank you. We also have some parents on the audience watching the live. So just like a few tips, if you could share about how to help, children or their kids to become more familiar with the space and sciences. Or what do you think your parents did so great that really helped you to like understand and get more used to science? Because sometimes I think especially girls and I would say in Latin America are not very used to the idea of following a career in STEM. So what could parents do to help their girls or kids to become more familiar with STEM?
So the fun part is that my parents did absolutely nothing. And it all happened on its own. I mean, the only thing that my parents did was like, let's watch science fiction movies together, and that was it, like normal thing. And nobody in my family was passionate about space. Like no one. No one is in STEM at all. No science, no engineering, no nothing. Like I'm the first of my family. Actually, there is a fun story. I'm going to say it just because it's a nice one. Like my grandfather was the only person to be passionate about astronomy. The problem is that I never met him because he passed away 1 month before my birth. And he was the only person, and my mom tells me about him, and that's so crazy. But that's it. Honestly, I think that there is a huge lack of space in education and in schools. I think if astronomy was a real subject in school, then more children would tend to want and learn more about it, because I honestly don't know how it is in your countries, but here in Italy, there is absolutely no space in school, like not at all. I don't even know if I would be here right now if it wasn't for my professor who became obsessed with the International Space Station. So I think the most important thing is to bring space to schools. And I'm even working on a project to make that happen here in Italy, probably. That would be my goal.
Well, let us know how it goes, and like we'll be happy to also maybe like duplicate it here in Latin America. We have people from like all Latin America watching you, so
Cool.
I know a lot of people are also interested in bringing science and space and everything that's aerospace to schools in Paraguay and Latin America. So we have Rose Santos saying grazie mille. I hope I pronounced it correctly.
Yeah, it was perfect. Gracias. Claro de sí. Preguntas.
Preguntas. So just like one like last questions, or maybe it's not a question, but if you could share some tips, like for anyone who was in your position of, okay, I love aerospace, I love sciences, and perhaps I would like to start writing about that and making hard science more known. Do you have any final tips before we have to go to like the next presentation?
So it would be good for people who want to write about science fiction.
Yeah.
Okay, so writing is absolutely a free activity. So just get an idea, get a story that you want to write, and just start writing. Like, dive into that world that you are creating and start talking about that story. And probably you would need previous world building in order to make it scientific accurate. So first you focus on the technical problems, you solve everything that needs to be solved, scientifically speaking, and then just dive into the story. And always remember that you know that a story is good when it writes itself and you're not forcing it. When you literally can't wait to sit down and write to see what's going to happen, that's when you know it's a great story. I'm done. You're muted. I can't hear you.
Oh, I love that. I just was saying like, I really like that. And where can we find your books, Giulia? So anyone who would like to follow you, it's Astro_Giulia, but also like if we want to get your books, where can we get them?
So if you're on Instagram, you can find the link in my bio and they're all there, or just search for the titles on Amazon.
Thank you so much. Okay, so it's Astro_Giulia or Astro_Giulia for anyone who's interested in following Giulia, and also like watch her videos on YouTube. They're not only very instructional, but also very funny to watch. I really love them.
No, my videos are so embarrassing. I don't even know why I do them.
Please leave them. I love them.
Thank you.
And thank you so much. Thank you so much for taking the time to share your story with us and tips. And I think it is really important that we keep fighting to bring more science to school in general, and also focus on writing based on realistic facts.
Yeah. Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
De esta manera finalizamos la charla de Giulia y de Sandra. Una vez más, fantásticas las chicas. Y a todos los participantes que llegaron hasta acá, les comento que vamos a iniciar la siguiente parte del foro. en otro link, así que estén atentos ya que la charla de Manik Johansson va a estar tremenda. Sandri otra vez nos va a acompañar Sandra Sanabria, así que estén todos atentos, no olviden seguirnos